What if losing people was never a loss, but a filter? Think about it. Most people are terrified of being alone. They chase validation, force connections, laugh at things they don't find funny, and stay in circles that slowly drain them, just to avoid silence. But a Sigma male? He walks a different path, and that path comes with a price. People leave. At first, it feels like something is wrong. Friends stop calling, conversations become shallow, invitations fade. You start noticing that the more you grow, the fewer people understand you. And that's when most people panic, but not you. Because deep down, you begin to realize something powerful. You're not losing people, you're outgrowing them. See, Sigma males don't operate on dependency. They don't need constant attention or approval. They value depth over noise, meaning over popularity. And when you start thinking like that, a lot of relationships simply can't survive. Some people were only there for the version of you that was easy to control, but others were there because you played small. And many were never really there at all. So when they leave, it creates
जबरदस्ती
space. Space to think, space to build,
भैया
space to
तू
become
वश
someone
कसे
rare.
कसे
While
वश
others are busy maintaining fake connections, you're sharpening your mind. While they fear
वश
being
कसे
alone,
कसे ना
you're mastering it. And in that
सिगरेट
solitude,
फुटते हैं
something incredible
बस
happens.
ये चाहिए
You
था
gain
ना
clarity. You start seeing people for who they really are. You
हाँ
stop tolerating disrespect. You become selective, not lonely. And here's the truth nobody talks about. The fewer people you have around you, the more valuable your circle becomes. Sigma males don't need 100 friends. They need 2 or 3 real ones. People who understand silence, people who don't compete, but align, people who don't drain your energy, but multiply it. And until those people come into your life, you're perfectly fine walking alone, because what you gain is far greater than what you lose. You gain freedom, you gain self-respect. You gain control over your time, your energy, and your direction. And most importantly, you gain yourself. So if you feel like people are drifting away from you, don't chase them. Don't shrink yourself to keep them. Instead, ask yourself, am I becoming someone they can't grow with or someone they were never meant to understand? Because the Sigma path isn't about being alone forever. It's about refusing to stay where you don't belong. And once you truly understand that, you'll stop seeing distance as rejection and start seeing it as evolution. Outgrowing people, at some point in your life, something shifts. It's not loud, it's not dramatic, but it's real. The way you think changes. The things that used to excite you no longer do. Conversations that once felt normal start to feel empty. Jokes that everyone laughs at begin to sound repetitive. And slowly, without even noticing, you realize you're not the same person anymore. This is where most people get confused. They think something is wrong with them. They start asking, why don't I enjoy the same things anymore? Why do I feel disconnected from people I've known for years? But here's the truth most people never accept. Growth is lonely. When you evolve mentally, emotionally, and even spiritually, you don't just upgrade your mindset, you change your standards. And the moment your standards change, your environment starts to feel different. People you once connected with were aligned with your old version. That version that tolerated more, that version that needed validation, that version that stayed quiet just to fit in. But now, you've changed, you think deeper, you speak less, but with purpose. You observe more than you react, and that creates distance. Not because you hate people, not because you think you're better, but because you no longer resonate with the same energy. Some friends will feel it before you even say anything. They'll notice you're quieter, more focused, less interested in meaningless conversations. And instead of trying to understand, they'll pull away. Others might even criticize you. You've changed. You're not the same anymore. And they're right, you're not. But what they don't understand is this. You had to change. Because staying the same would mean staying stuck. Outgrowing people is not about abandoning them. It's about accepting that not everyone is meant to grow with you. Some people are part of your beginning, not your future. And holding on to them out of nostalgia will only slow you down. That's the hard part. Letting go of people you shared memories with. People who knew your past. People who were there when things were different. But if they no longer align with who you're becoming, you have a choice to make. Stay comfortable or keep growing. Sigma males choose growth, even when it costs them friendships, even when it means walking alone, even when everything around them starts to feel quieter. Because deep down, they understand something powerful. Not everyone is meant to make it to the next level of your life. And that's not sad. That's necessary. At some point, you stop chasing approval. You don't wake up one day and decide it suddenly. It happens slowly, through experiences, disappointments, and realizations. You start noticing how much energy you used to spend trying to be liked, adjusting your personality depending on who you were around, laughing at things you didn't find funny, agreeing with opinions you didn't believe in, all just to fit in. And then something clicks. You realize that no matter how much you try, you will never be enough for everyone. Someone will always misunderstand you. Someone will always judge you. Someone will always have something to say. And once you truly understand that, you stop performing. You stop trying to win everyone over. This is where people start to drift away, because a lot of relationships are built on approval, not authenticity. People are comfortable with the version of you that adapts, that agrees, that doesn't challenge anything. But the moment you start being real, the moment you stop pretending, things change. You say what you actually think. You set boundaries. You stop over-explaining yourself. You become more silent but more honest. And suddenly, not everyone likes you anymore. Some people feel uncomfortable around you because they can't read you like before. Others feel threatened because you're no longer easy to influence. And some simply leave because they were never connected to the real you in the first place. And that's the part most people fear, losing people. But what they don't realize is that those connections were never solid to begin with. If someone only stays because you're playing a role, then they're not connected to you, they're connected to the version of you that you created for them. Sigma males understand this deeply. They would rather be respected by a few than liked by many. They choose authenticity over approval, even if it means standing alone. Because being alone with self-respect is far better than being surrounded by people while feeling fake. And here's where the shift becomes powerful. When you stop chasing approval, you start attracting something different. You attract people who don't need you to perform, people who accept your silence, people who respect your boundaries, people who see you, not the mask. These connections are rare, they take time, but they are real, and until they come, you're not desperate, you're not chasing, you're not forcing conversations. You're not lowering your standards just to feel included. You're building yourself. Because you finally understand that approval is temporary, but self-respect is permanent. And once you reach that point, something inside you becomes unshakable. You don't need everyone anymore. And that's exactly why the right people start finding you. At a certain point, you start valuing peace more than excitement, more than attention, more than being part of everything. You begin to notice how draining chaos really is. The constant arguments, the unnecessary drama, the emotional ups and downs that come from being around the wrong people. What once felt normal starts to feel exhausting, and that's when your priorities change. You no longer feel the need to be everywhere. You don't respond to every message immediately. You don't engage in every debate. You become more selective with your energy. This is where people start misunderstanding you. They think you've become distant. They say you're cold. They assume you don't care anymore. But the truth is simple. You care more than ever. Just not about the same things. You care about your mental clarity. You care about your focus. You care about protecting your energy. And protecting your peace requires something most people avoid. Boundaries. You start saying no without explaining yourself. You stop entertaining gossip. You walk away from conversations that go nowhere. And not everyone likes that. Because when you remove yourself from drama, you also remove yourself from the roles people assigned to you. The listener, the people pleaser, the one who's always available. Now, you're different. You don't react the same. You don't get pulled into unnecessary situations. You don't allow others to disturb your state of mind. And that makes some people uncomfortable, because they can no longer control your reactions. They can no longer rely on your presence the way they used to. So they drift away. But here's the truth. If someone only feels connected to you when there is chaos, then it was never a healthy connection to begin with. Peace exposes everything. It reveals who respects your space and who only values you when you're accessible. It shows who understands your silence and who takes it personally. It separates those who bring calm into your life from those who bring noise. Sigma males don't chase noise. They choose peace, even if it means being alone. Because peace is not empty, it's clarity. It's the ability to think without distraction. It's the freedom to move without pressure. It's the space where real growth happens. And once you get used to that level of calm, you can't go back. Loud environments start to feel uncomfortable. Superficial conversations feel like a waste of time. Drama feels unnecessary. You become addicted to your own space. Not because you hate people, but because you finally found something better than constant connection. You found control over your mind. And that's rare. So if choosing peace costs you people, let it. Because the right people won't disrupt your peace. They'll match it. At some point, you start seeing people for who they really are. Not who they pretend to be. Not who you hoped they were, but who they consistently show themselves to be through their actions. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. This is where fake friendships begin to fall apart. In the past, you might have ignored certain signs. You gave people the benefit of the doubt. You overlooked disrespect. You stayed loyal, even when it wasn't returned. But as you grow, your awareness sharpens. You begin to notice the small things. Who only reaches out when they need something? Who disappears when you're going through something? Who feels uncomfortable when you're making progress? Who smiles in front of you but speaks differently behind your back? At first, it's subtle. Then it becomes obvious. And that's when everything changes. Because now, you have a choice. Pretend you don't see it, or accept the truth and act accordingly. Most people choose to ignore it. They stay in fake friendships because it's easier than being alone. They convince themselves that it's not that bad, or that's just how people are. But Sigma males don't operate like that. They don't ignore patterns, they pay attention. Because they understand that actions are always more honest than words. Someone can say they support you, but their behavior will reveal the truth. Someone can claim loyalty, but their consistency will expose them. And once a Sigma male sees that misalignment, he doesn't argue, he doesn't create drama, he doesn't try to fix people. He simply steps back, quietly, without announcements, without explanations. And that's what confuses people the most. Because they expect reactions, they expect confrontation. They expect you to chase, to question, to hold on. But instead, you withdraw your energy, you stop investing, you stop reaching out, you stop giving access. And slowly the connection fades. Not out of anger, but out of clarity, because you finally understand something powerful. Not everyone who is around you is for you. Some people are only there for convenience. Some are there for what you provide. Some are there because you tolerated more than you should have. And once you stop providing, stop tolerating, stop being available, they disappear. And that's not a loss. That's exposure. Fake friends don't leave randomly. They leave when they can no longer benefit. So instead of feeling betrayed, you start feeling aware. You realize that their absence is not punishment, it's protection. Because now your circle becomes cleaner. Smaller, yes, but real. And that changes everything. Because one genuine connection is worth more than 100 fake ones. And once you experience that difference, you'll never go back to forcing relationships that were never real to begin with. At a certain stage in your life, you stop being open to everyone. Not because you've become arrogant, but because you've become aware. You realize that access to you is valuable, and not everyone deserves it. In the past, you might have let people in too easily. You trusted quickly. You shared your plans, your thoughts, your energy without thinking twice. And more often than not, that came with a cost. People misunderstood you. People took advantage of your openness. People wasted your time. And slowly you learned. Not everyone who shows interest has good intentions. Not everyone who smiles at you respects you. Not everyone who enters your life deserves to stay. So you change your approach. You become more selective. You don't open up right away. You observe more than you speak. You take your time before trusting someone. And from the outside, this looks like distance. People might say you've become hard to reach. They might think you're cold or unfriendly. But what they don't understand is this. You're not rejecting people. You're filtering them. Because you've realized that your time, your energy, and your focus are limited. And if you give them to the wrong people, you pay the price. You lose momentum, you lose clarity, you lose peace. So now, you choose carefully. You pay attention to consistency, not words. You watch how people act when there's nothing to gain. You notice how they treat others, not just how they treat you. And based on that, you decide who gets access. Sigma males don't build large circles. They build intentional ones. They would rather have a few solid connections than be surrounded by people who bring no real value. Because they understand something most people ignore. Every person in your life either adds to you or subtracts from you. There is no neutral. Someone either brings clarity or confusion, growth or distraction, peace or stress. And once you see relationships like that, you can't go back to being careless with your circle. You stop keeping people around just because of history. You stop tolerating behavior that doesn't align with your standards. You stop forcing connections that feel one-sided. Instead, you become patient. You're willing to wait for the right people. People who respect your time. People who understand your silence. People who don't need constant attention to stay connected. And until they come, you're fine on your own. Because being selective is not about isolation, it's about protection. It's about making sure that the people around you reflect the direction you're going. And once you build a circle like that, even if it's small, it becomes powerful. Because it's real. At some point, being alone stops feeling like something you have to endure and starts feeling like something you choose. What once felt uncomfortable becomes familiar. What once felt empty becomes productive. And slowly, solitude transforms into power. Most people are afraid of being alone. They associate it with loneliness, rejection, or failure. They need constant noise, messages, calls, social media, conversations, anything to avoid sitting with their own thoughts. Because silence forces you to face yourself, and not everyone is ready for that. But Sigma males learn to sit in that silence, not to escape the world, but to understand themselves better. When you spend time alone, you start noticing things you never paid attention to before. Your thoughts become clearer. Your decisions become more intentional. You're no longer influenced by every opinion around you. You begin to think for yourself. And that's where the power starts. Because when you're comfortable alone, you become independent in a way that most people never reach. You don't need constant validation. You don't rely on others to feel complete. You don't panic when there's no one around. Instead, you use that time. You reflect, you plan, you build. While others are distracted, you're focused. While others are chasing attention, you're developing yourself. While others fear silence, you're mastering it. And over time, that creates a gap. A gap between you and those who can't function without constant interaction. But here's the difference. You're not isolating yourself because you hate people. You're choosing solitude because it gives you control. Control over your time, control over your energy, control over your direction. And once you experience that level of control, it becomes addictive. You realize how peaceful it is to wake up without unnecessary noise, how productive it is to work without distractions, how powerful it is to move without needing approval. Solitude sharpens you. It forces you to rely on yourself. It teaches you discipline. It reveals your strengths and your weaknesses. And instead of running from that, you face it. That's what makes it powerful. Because now, when you do choose to be around people, it's not out of need. It's out of choice. You're not there because you're lonely. You're there because the connection is worth your time. And that changes everything. Because a man who is comfortable alone is not easy to influence. He's not easy to pressure. He's not easy to control. He moves differently. And people can feel that. So if you find yourself spending more time alone, don't see it as a loss. See it as training. Because in that space, you're not just passing time. You're building a version of yourself that doesn't depend on anyone. And that's rare. At a certain point, your self-respect becomes more important than your attachments. You stop holding on to people just because you've known them for a long time. You stop tolerating behavior that drains you. And most importantly, you stop betraying yourself just to keep others comfortable. This shift doesn't happen overnight. It comes from experience. From moments where you stayed silent when you should have spoken. From times you accepted less than you deserved. From situations where you gave too much and received too little. And after enough of that, something inside you changes. You start paying attention to how people make you feel. Not just what they say, but what their presence does to your energy. Do you feel respected? Do you feel valued? Do you feel at peace? Or do you feel drained, overlooked, and constantly adjusting yourself? Once you start asking those questions, your standards rise. You no longer accept inconsistency. You no longer excuse disrespect. You no longer chase people who treat you like an option. And that's where self-respect is built. Not in what you say, but in what you tolerate. Because every time you allow something that goes against your values, you weaken your own foundation. And every time you walk away from something that doesn't align, you strengthen it. Sigma males understand this deeply. They know that self-respect is not negotiable. It's not something you turn on and off depending on the situation. It's a constant. So when someone crosses a boundary, they don't argue endlessly. They don't beg for better treatment. They don't try to convince someone to value them. They step back calmly, quietly, without needing to explain everything. And yes, that costs them people, because not everyone is willing to meet your standards. Some people are used to the version of you that accepted everything, the version that stayed no matter what, but that version no longer exists. Now you choose yourself, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it means letting go, even when it leaves you with fewer people around you, because you've realized something important. Being alone with self-respect is far better than being surrounded by people who make you question your worth. And over time, that decision changes how others see you. People start respecting your space. They think twice before crossing your boundaries. They understand that your presence is not guaranteed, not because you demand respect loudly, but because you embody it quietly. And that's powerful, because real self-respect doesn't need validation. It shows in your actions, in your standards, in what you accept and what you walk away from. So if choosing yourself costs you people, let it. Because anyone who requires you to lower your standards to keep them was never meant to stay in your life in the first place. At some point, after all the distance, the silence, the filtering, and the growth, something unexpected happens. You start attracting different people. Not more people, better people. It doesn't happen overnight. In fact, there might be a long period where it feels like nothing is happening at all. Your circle is small, your phone is quiet, your days are focused but solitary, and from the outside, it might look like you've lost everything. But what's really happening is something deeper. You're resetting your environment. Because once you've raised your standards, once you've built self-respect, once you've learned to be alone, you can no longer connect with just anyone. And that automatically filters out the wrong people. So when new people enter your life, they're different. They don't need constant attention. They don't drain your energy. They don't compete with you. They align with you. Conversations feel natural, not forced. Silence feels comfortable, not awkward. Respect is mutual, not one-sided. And most importantly, there is no pressure. No pressure to impress. No pressure to explain yourself. No pressure to constantly prove your worth. Because these people see you for who you are, and they respect it. That's the difference. In the past, you might have built connections out of convenience. People were around because of proximity, routine, or shared environments. But now, your connections are intentional. They're based on mindset, on values, on mutual understanding. And that's why they're rare. You might only have one or two people like this in your life. But that's enough, because one real connection can give you more clarity, support, and strength than a crowd of surface-level friendships ever could. Sigma males don't chase these connections, they attract them. Through their behavior, through their standards, through the way they carry themselves. When you're not desperate for attention, you move differently. When you're not seeking validation, you speak differently. When you're comfortable alone, you choose differently. And the right people notice that. They recognize the calm, they respect the boundaries, they understand the silence, because they operate on a similar level. And when two people like that connect, it's not loud, it's not dramatic, it's solid, built on trust, not words, built on consistency, not promises, built on understanding, not assumptions, and that's what makes it valuable. Because now, you're no longer surrounded by people just to avoid being alone. You're connected to people who actually add to your life, people who push you forward, people who respect your path, people who don't need to be many to matter. And once you experience that kind of connection, everything changes. You stop missing the old crowd. You stop craving attention. You stop lowering your standards. Because now you understand something clearly. It was never about having more people. It was always about having the right ones. At the end of all this, you realize something most people spend their entire lives avoiding. You were never losing people. You were finding yourself. In the beginning, it feels like loss. The silence feels heavy. The distance feels personal. You question everything. You wonder if you did something wrong, if you pushed people away, if becoming this version of yourself was worth it. But as time passes, that confusion turns into clarity. You start to see patterns. You notice how your mind is calmer without constant noise, how your days feel more intentional without unnecessary distractions, how your energy is no longer being pulled in different directions, and slowly, you reconnect with something you ignored for a long time, yourself. Not the version shaped by others' expectations, not the version that tried to fit in everywhere, but the real one, the one that thinks independently, the one that doesn't need approval to move forward, the one that is comfortable standing alone if necessary. And that realization changes everything, because now you're no longer afraid of losing people. You understand that anything that requires you to shrink, to pretend, or to betray your own values is not something worth keeping. You stop chasing, you stop forcing, you stop explaining yourself to people who were never trying to understand you in the first place. Instead, you focus inward, you build your discipline, you sharpen your mindset, you move with purpose. And the more you do that, the more stable you become. Not emotionally dependent, not easily shaken, not influenced by every opinion around you. You become grounded. And that's what most people never reach, because they spend their lives trying to be accepted by others, while you took the harder path and accepted yourself. That's the real gain. Not just better people, not just peace, not just clarity, but identity. Knowing who you are, what you stand for, and what you will never tolerate again. And once you have that, everything else becomes secondary. Opinions don't control you. Rejection doesn't break you. Loneliness doesn't scare you. Because you're no longer empty when you're alone. You're complete. And from that place, you move differently. You choose differently. You trust differently. You live differently. Not for validation, not for approval, but for alignment. And that's why, in the end, losing people was never the real story. Becoming yourself was. And once you reach that point, something else changes that most people don't expect. Your time starts to matter more than anything. You begin to see time differently. Before, you gave it away easily. Hours in conversations that led nowhere. Days spent around people who didn't push you forward. Energy invested in maintaining connections that had no real depth, and you didn't question it, because everyone else was doing the same. But now, you're aware. You realize that every moment you spend is either building you or slowly pulling you away from who you're trying to become. And that awareness makes you protective. You stop saying yes to everything. You stop showing up just out of habit. You stop giving your attention to things that don't deserve it. Not out of arrogance, but out of discipline. Because you've understood something most people ignore. Time is the one thing you can't get back. Money can be earned again. Opportunities can return. Even relationships can be rebuilt. But time? Once it's gone, it's gone. And Sigma males treat that seriously. They don't waste hours trying to impress people. They don't invest in conversations that don't add value. They don't stay in environments that slow them down. They choose carefully what they focus on, who they spend time with, what they allow into their space. And yes, that makes their circle smaller. Because not everyone deserves access to your time. Not everyone deserves your attention. Not everyone deserves your presence. And once you start living like that, people notice. Some will say you've become distant. Others will think you're too serious. Some might even feel offended by your absence. But what they don't understand is this. You're not avoiding people. You're prioritizing your life. Because every hour you protect, every distraction you avoid, every meaningless interaction you walk away from adds up. It compounds into focus, into progress, into results. While others are busy everywhere, doing everything, talking to everyone, you're moving with intention, quietly, consistently, without needing to announce it. And over time, that creates a difference that can't be ignored. Not because you were louder, not because you had more connections, but because you respected your time when others didn't. And that's what gives you an edge. Because discipline is not about doing more. It's about doing less, but doing what actually matters. So if protecting your time costs you people, let it. Because the ones who truly understand your value will never expect you to waste it. And after all of that, you reach a level where your silence becomes your strongest statement. You no longer feel the need to explain yourself. Before, you used to clarify everything. You wanted people to understand your intentions, your decisions, your mindset. You would go out of your way to make sure nobody misunderstood you. But now, you see things differently. You realize that people don't misunderstand you by accident. They understand you based on their own level. Some will get you, some won't. And chasing explanations won't change that. So you stop over-explaining. You stop defending every decision. You stop trying to convince people that you're right. Instead, you let your actions speak. You move quietly. You make decisions without announcements. You let results do the talking. And that shift is powerful. Because silence creates mystery. It creates presence. It creates a kind of respect that words can't force. People start paying attention to what you do, not what you say. And the less you talk, the more weight your words carry when you finally do. Sigma males understand this deeply. They don't need to broadcast everything. They don't need constant validation from others. They don't feel the urge to prove themselves in every conversation. Because they know their value doesn't come from what they say. It comes from how they move. And this is where many people lose access to you. Because they were used to the version of you that explained everything. The version that tried to be understood. The version that kept the conversation going. But now you're different. You don't argue with people who are committed to misunderstanding you. You don't waste energy on pointless debates. You don't react to every opinion thrown your way. You choose silence, not as weakness, but as control. Control over your emotions, control over your reactions, control over your energy. And that makes you unpredictable. Not in a chaotic way, but in a disciplined one. People can't easily read you. They can't easily provoke you. They can't easily influence you. And that creates distance. Because most people are used to noise. They're used to constant talking, constant reacting, constant explaining. Silence feels unfamiliar to them, so some will step back. Some will feel disconnected. Some will assume you've changed too much. But that's fine, because you're no longer trying to be accessible to everyone. You're focused on being aligned with yourself. And in that alignment, you don't need to say much. Your presence speaks. Your discipline shows. Your results prove everything. So if becoming quieter costs you people, let it. Because the ones who truly understand you won't need constant explanations to stay. And in the end, you understand something that changes everything. It was never about becoming a Sigma male. It was about becoming real. Because labels don't matter. Titles don't matter. What matters is how you live when no one is watching. All this distance, all this silence, all these people you lost, they weren't random. They were part of the process. A process that stripped away everything that wasn't truly you. The fake connections, the forced conversations, the need to belong everywhere. All of it had to go. Not to leave you empty, but to leave you clear. Clear about who you are, clear about what you want, clear about what you will never accept again. And once you reach that clarity, something shifts permanently. You stop looking outside for answers. You stop comparing your life to others. You stop feeling behind. Because you're no longer following their path. You're building your own. And that path is quiet. It doesn't come with applause. It doesn't come with constant recognition. It doesn't always look exciting from the outside. But it's solid, built on discipline, built on awareness, built on decisions most people are too afraid to make. Walking away, saying no, choosing yourself over and over again. And yes, it cost you people, it cost you comfort, it cost you familiarity. But what you gain is something most people never experience. Freedom. Freedom to think for yourself, freedom to move without pressure, freedom to live without pretending. And that's why, in the end, you don't regret the distance. You don't miss the old version of your life. You don't wish things stayed the same, because you finally understand. You didn't lose people. You removed what was holding you back. And what's left is something stronger, something calmer, something real, you. Before you go, take a second and think about this. Look at your life right now. The people around you, the conversations you're having, the energy you feel every day. Are they pushing you forward or quietly holding you back? Because the truth is simple. Not everyone is meant to grow with you. And the moment you accept that, everything changes. So here's the real question. If you had to choose between keeping the same people or becoming the best version of yourself, what would you choose? Let me know in the comments. And if this video made you see things differently, follow for more content like this. Because sometimes, one shift in mindset is all it takes to change everything.